Understanding Strategic Communication in Business. Introduction. Over the course of the previous 2 decades, the concept of strategic communication has grown in recognition all over the world, making it more accessible to people in every region. It is vital to combine the efforts that are dedicated to communications with a particular strategy and an all-encompassing plan that are aimed toward the fulfillment of a particular purpose. Only then will it be possible to achieve this goal. This all-encompassing strategy should normally be the practice of soliciting the participation of members of the public in order to disseminate information about the name of a firm, group, or institution, as well as its closely targeted actions, responsibilities, and legislative lobbying. This should be done in order to disseminate information about a firm, group, or institution. The phrase strategic communication has been defined by a huge number of different people in a wide range of different ways. These people include both academics and business people. They have described it as an approach that assists in better comprehending what is being addressed, while simultaneously encouraging relevant stakeholders to join in talks. Information operations, public diplomacy, and information management all play a role in information management, which is the management of public policy and administration. Some individuals have referred to it as public relations, which is more commonly abbreviated as PR. Why engage in strategic communication? In pragmatic terms, there are many different academic fields that fall under the umbrella of communications. The fact still remains that the field of communication is extremely vast. It includes a variety of professionals, such as those who create news or are in the business of disseminating information to the public, such as public relations, marketing, public information. Those who have the responsibility to inform the general public of crucial events or happenings in the world, and they include journalists, audio and video producers, educators, and public speakers, and those who study the field. And because they research how the media and society interact, these people can equally be referred to as researchers or social scientists. The primary objective of strategic communication is to integrate the processes of getting carefully produced messages to the public and conveying those messages to the public. To be strategic in this regard simply means disseminating the most effective message that is presently available and doing so through the appropriate channels according to the circumstances. Communication conveyed needs to be of the highest quality in order to ensure success when compared to organizational goals and those relating specifically to communications. Doing so would be very much in order. When policymakers started taking notice of the field of strategic communication, it started to become very clear that the comparatively low entry parameters into the constantly growing number of different media spaces were going to become a source of difficulty. The idea behind this was that if things were not managed properly, any message could potentially get through, and if it was not removed, it would result in public shame for the organization. The intrinsic lack of structure led to the proliferation of many media outlets, and thus, non-strategic communication has grown in popularity. Everyone was allowed to publish or post whatever they saw fit without intervention. To be completely honest, people were getting a lot of hits, impressions, likes, and follows, but for what purpose? The decision makers and high management members desired a better outcome. They desired communication to be spread in an appropriate manner to attain more clearly defined and measurable goals. The purpose of this effort was to have an in-depth conversation on the art of strategic communication, including how it is used, where it is utilized, and the reason why it is deployed. We will investigate what people who worked in the field of communication in the past thought about the concept, how they interpreted it, and how they went on to implement its principles, as well as the things that we may learn from their experiences. It is true that technological advancements have continued to advance and have brought about a great deal of innovation. On the other hand, the strategic approaches that communication experts have utilized over the years share striking similarities, and we can gain a great deal of knowledge from all of this. Over the course of the past several years, the methods of planning and research for strategic public relations have grown to become, without a doubt, the most effective tools that are accessible to be used by public relations professionals. The increasingly competitive nature of the business environment in the world today places an increased amount of pressure on the managers of communication channels to be able to demonstrate in a transparent and measurable manner how the results obtained from their public relations programs benefit their respective organizations. These expert practitioners are supported by their organizations, which not only provide them with more leeway in the decisions they make, but also make certain that they have access to the most cutting-edge resources that are currently on the market. These practitioners also have access to larger budgets to ensure that the activities are carried out without a hitch. All of these things are done as a result of companies making the decision to become more strategic and thoughtful with regard to the content that they put out. Chapter 1: Strategic Communication and Overview. When we talk about something being strategic, we simply mean that it identifies long-term or overall goals and interests. On the other hand, the term communication refers to the process of exchanging information through a variety of media, such as verbal exchange, written exchange, or even body language. When we talk about something being strategic, we simply mean that it identifies long-term or overall goals and interests. To share, communicate, or impart is the meaning attributed to the Latin verb communicare, from which the English word communication was formed, according to the findings of some researchers. Again, it was directly derived from a Latin adjective called commis, which translates to common or shared locally. This is where the word originated from. Originally, the term referred to the act of sharing material items, which, depending on the circumstances, may encompass everything from food to land to property to products. In today's world, communication is most commonly used in the context of knowledge and information, which can either be processed by living beings or by computers. Moving beyond the earliest person-to-person method of communication, historical evidence suggests that ancient Greeks frequently used fire at night and sunlight reflecting mirrors during the day to communicate with one another. The Romans, for their part, made use of beacon towers to communicate with one another. American Indians were famous for using smoke signals during the day and fire arrows during the night as a form of communication. The majority of the indigenous people who lived in Africa are said to have communicated with one another at some point or another through the use of drums and the sounds that the drums make. Communication as an all-encompassing phenomenon. Every living organism that man has discovered communicates in a manner that is suited to it for a variety of reasons. These reasons may include the desire to pass on information regarding locations where food supplies can be found, or even warnings of impending dangers to help guarantee the safety of the community or population. Regardless of the reason, every living organism communicates in a manner that is suited to it. Pheromones, which are hormones involved in communication, are one of the many ways that animals communicate with one another. Other forms of chemical signaling are also used. Some animals communicate with one another by the use of their bodies, which may take the form of dancing, as is the case with bees, vocal expressions, and a body language, as is the case with monkeys, canines, and felines, among other animals. The process of communication between human beings consists primarily of verbal and non-verbal or written messages that are more complex and as such have only a small reliance on pheromones, chemicals, and extreme body language depending on the circumstances. Following on from the simple and frequently complicated ancient communication systems that we have discussed above, humans have now progressed to the point where they have invented a variety of spoken and written languages for the purposes of communication. The printing press, the landline telephone, which has since evolved into mobile cellular phones, radio, and television, as well as wired and wireless telegraph, are all examples of things that were created because of man's ingenuity. People can communicate with one another in a matter of seconds using modern digitized systems which have more global coverage in real time without any hassles. As a result of this, it is commonplace to see people communicating with one another in today's world, even though they may be separated by thousands of miles from one another. What is strategic communication? The phrase strategic communication can be used to refer to the dissemination of ideas, methods, or data that enables forward planning in support of the long-term strategic purpose of an organization. It is also possible to activate the function of an institution that has the responsibility of managing both its internal and external communications. Communication strategies that are strategic can be beneficial during times of political instability. Strategic communication over long distances is required to coordinate the actions and activities of operationally significant commercial, non-commercial, and military businesses, combat, or logistics subunits. This is typically accomplished through the use of international telecommunications or dedicated global network assets. This is required in order to achieve significant operational importance. Furthermore, the United States government describes strategic communication as focused United States government efforts to understand and engage key audiences to create, strengthen, or preserve conditions favorable for the advancement of United States government interests, policies, and objectives through the use of coordinated programs, plans, themes, messages, and products synchronized with the actions of all instruments of national power. It is conceivable for us to come to the conclusion that communication can only be considered strategic if it is precisely linked with the vision, mission, and values of an organization, and if it is also capable of boosting the organization's ability to compete by strategically positioning itself. To comprehend the impact that culture has on all aspects of marketing communications, it is necessary to engage in strategic communication, which is a blend of theory and practice. Strategic communication includes the study of global cultural movements, trends in marketing strategies, and the dynamics of consumer behavior. The capacity for strategic thought is vital since it fosters the creative process. Strategic communication is necessary if one wishes to give the appearance that creative ideas are clever and crafty. By enrolling in a communication program, you can, for instance, learn how to manage the creative aspect of the research process and how to become a strategic creative while simultaneously gaining knowledge and insights that will help you produce an effective creative strategy statement at the conclusion of your research. The higher level issues that motivate an organization's attempts to stay on track with its goals by merely expressing the appropriate message are usually referred to as strategic communication, which is a term that is commonly used to characterize those challenges. This is because strategic communication is a term that is frequently used to handle issues of a high level. The reason for this may be found in the fact that it shouldn't come as a surprise that businesses are always battling with one another for market share, with the end objective of establishing themselves as market leaders in the industries that they have selected as their targets. Because of this, for these businesses to surpass their competition and accomplish what they set out to do, they need to use a variety of approaches to communication. Management of strategic communication requires rigorous planning and execution of information flow, key communication, establishment of media objectives, and image construction, particularly over an extended period. This is especially true when it comes to image making. It is a system that transmits deliberate messages using the medium that is most appropriate for the intended audiences at a given time, when it is guaranteed to have a long-term effect and impact on those audiences. In other words, it is a time when it is possible for the message to have an impact and effect on those audiences. In general, managing communication includes searching for a happy medium between three distinct factors, namely the message that is being communicated, the media channel via which it is conveyed, and the audience that is meant to receive it. The key here is to have a firm grasp on the broader concept of communication strategy. The entire strategy must be considered from the perspective of the organization for it to make any sense at all. This implies that for communication within an organization to be called strategic, it must conform to the precisely planned structure of information flow within that company. As a result, the framework for strategic communication should be built to completely pay attention to the organization's goal when talking to each audience or group of individuals at any given time. This attention should be paid regardless of the audience or group of individuals with whom you are communicating. If a corporation makes a determined effort to distribute specific pieces of literature that are in line with this, it will undoubtedly go a long way toward achieving the organization's goals and objectives. While communication occurs in any organization, it is important to note that businesses that go to great lengths to implement sound strategies aimed at impacting the effectiveness and workability of their business communications always end up with the best results when measured and compared to their competitors who do not. This is because organizations that go to great pains to implement excellent methods that can assist them in affecting the effectiveness and usability of their business communications are always rewarded. In recent years, the advancement of technology has had a tremendous impact on international trade. As a result, information may now be transferred via a wide range of diverse methods and channels developed on the internet. Year after year, the level of technological innovation in the media sector has increased at a pretty high rate, which has helped to speed the pace of communications and enhance productivity. Customers can now interact and engage with businesses in real time without having to go through a series of tedious hoops thanks to advances in technology. This technical advancement has simplified things for businesses, which can now rely on effective feedback mechanisms to improve the quality of their products and services and better meet the needs and expectations of their customers. Again, these changes have resulted in a significantly more demanding and competitive business climate for marketers and business development professionals. This is due to the fact that they now have a mandate to try to meet the wants and demands of their clients, who will always want more, some type of change. It is also a good idea to make adjustments from time to time because doing so will aid in both the accomplishment of the organization's communication objectives and the restructuring of the communication channels that are already in place. When it comes to measuring the efficacy of a communication strategy implemented in a company based on the type of audience they have, doing so will surely have an impact on the findings produced. In today's environment, anyone interested in starting a business, no matter how small the scope of that business is expected to be, must give some attention to the function that communication strategy will play in the business. When a firm is still in its infancy, the way it manages the flow of information within the company will determine how long it will remain in existence. In general, putting in the necessary efforts to communicate with employees and consumers on a regular basis will simply boost trust levels between them. And this is exactly what a firm needs to do to prosper in an increasingly competitive economy. Over the last 2 decades, there has been a surge in interest in the teaching of strategic communication in the field of communication science education. Members of the administration and the military forces were the only ones who used them at first. It is increasingly gaining popularity as a broader concept that encompasses goal-oriented communication activities that are typically covered by fields such as public relations, financial and health communications, marketing management, public diplomacy, various sorts of campaigns, and so on. Strategic communication activities are now included in this broader definition. It is worth noting that numerous institutions in the United States of America have now merged public relations and advertising studies into strategic communication curricula, which were formerly separate. In Europe, on the other hand, much progress has been made, and the word strategic communication is generally used to denote a managerial strategy when building integrated communication fields for various types of commercial organizations. In comparison, the situation in the United States is the inverse. Strategic communication has now evolved into a notion that is used in a variety of situations in Asia and Australia, including professional settings, literary works, and educational settings. Chapter 2: Understanding the place of strategic communication in business. In the modern, ever more complicated world, organizations are in a constant state of competition with one another for the admiration, affinity, connection, and commitment of diverse types of constituents: consumers, employees, shareholders, donors, public servants, leaders of special interest organizations, and members of the public are all examples of these types of constituents. Therefore, before committing any resources to these initiatives, businesses need to carefully examine not just the overall number of resources that are involved, but also the sort of resources that will be necessary to complete the project successfully. Communication strategies are deployed as a tool not just enterprises, but also by activist groups, social movements, and citizen movements to advance their respective causes and fulfill their respective aims. In the context of the modern business world, strategic communication examines corporate communication from the perspective of a unified and interdisciplinary body of knowledge. This is achieved by broadening the scope of concepts and issues that are established in a number of conventional communications disciplines. It is of the utmost importance to keep in mind that the modernist society of the 20th century was the driving force behind the expansion of these professions into positions of specialized expertise. However, these fields are currently operating within a postmodern setting as we enter the 21st century. This context places an emphasis on more comprehensive methods of studying organizational phenomena while simultaneously coping with audiences and delivery methods that are becoming more fragmented. Specifically, this context places an emphasis on more comprehensive methods of studying organizational phenomena. Even though communication does take place within organizations, those who take the necessary steps to put in place good strategies that have an impact on the efficiency of their company's communication can see results that are measurable. Even though communication does take place within organizations, those who take these steps can see results. Despite the fact that communication does take place within organizations, this is nevertheless the case. Because of developments in technology, Information may now be disseminated via a wide variety of media, such as the internet, and in some cases, through advertisements that are carefully targeted to the audience that is supposed to receive them. Thus, it is of the utmost importance that you realize the significance of the information you are in possession of at this very moment. Corporate communication. The ultimate purpose of corporate communication is to ensure that an organization's key stakeholders have a common understanding of its vision and the steps that are required to maintain its competitiveness. This is accomplished through the acquisition and effective application of a wide range of competitive advantages that give the organization an edge over its rivals. This is because these efforts are intended to ensure that an organization maintains its competitiveness by acquiring and effectively utilizing a variety of competitive advantages over its competitors. In accordance with this tactic, the stakeholders of an organization are its workers, customers, agents, suppliers, and representatives, as well as its stakeholders, vendors, press, and other media, as well as authorities that regulate at the local, regional, and national levels. And there is an endless list of the several publics that, according to the standard definition of public relations, both private businesses and public agencies are obligated to contact directly. Effective corporate communication is necessary to guarantee that the articulated vision is understood and embraced by management as well as the employees. This is necessary in order for the desired corporate culture to successfully infiltrate all levels of power and responsibility in the organization's chart of organizational structure. This is a prerequisite that must be met for the desired change in company culture to be successfully achieved. In the vast majority of well-established companies, improved internal communication is the primary factor that helps to strengthen an organization's identity and culture. A corporate vision that is pragmatic, inventive, and compelling will not only strengthen the company's culture amongst its human resources, but it will also have a positive influence on all other stakeholders or the public connected in a variety of ways to the corporate entity, such as the private or public organization or company. This is in addition to the fact that it will strengthen the company's culture among its human resources. This is going to be the case irrespective of whether the organization or firm in question is open to the public or not. Although the level of sophistication that distinguishes particular private or public small and medium enterprises, SMEs, or large-scale enterprises, LSEs, or organizations from one another may vary from one to the other. In day-to-day activities, everyone utilizes the variety of information, communication, and technology, ICT media, that are available. Local area network, LAN, and other computer networks, email, video conferencing or Skype, landline telephone systems, and currently at significantly reduced levels compared to a couple of decades ago, fax are all used on a regular basis by management teams, mid-level and line employees, and workers within the corporate entity. In addition, fax machines are used in some locations. Additionally, there is still a demand for fax machines. According to the structures that are in place today, the normal responsibility for handling corporate communication with external stakeholders or with the general public is given either to the corporate communication unit or to the public relations department. Both departments are responsible for maintaining positive relationships with the public. By putting in place this system, the company can assure itself that it is only projecting an image of authority and integrity at all times in all of its announcements. This can be done since the system is in place. In addition to this, the system guarantees coherence in the manner in which the relevant particulars are communicated to members of the general public who have an interest in being informed about them. In a world where competition is fierce, projecting and presenting the image of the corporation to its stakeholders and the public in a professional and forceful manner will build their respect and trust, which will undoubtedly provide the organization with a significant competitive advantage over the long term. Today, a significant number of businesses and organizations that can be categorized as large-scale enterprises, LSEs, and organizations, in addition to a few small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, create new magazines or in-house publications that are made available in printed and or digital format to keep their employees, shareholders, and the general public informed about their ongoing and upcoming activities. Large-scale businesses, both public and private, print a variety of publications, some of which are intended solely for use within the company, while others are intended for distribution to the public. Some of these publications are distributed to employees only, while others are distributed to the public. Typically, people both inside and outside of the organization have access to these kinds of publications when they are made available. Even though their international affiliates will translate the contents and publish them in the language of the country in which they are located, many of these magazines are published by internationally active businesses and public organizations, and it is customary for them to publish the original edition at their main offices in their mother tongue. There are a lot of these magazines that are published by internationally active businesses and public organizations. These magazines are available in large quantities. This category often comprises annual company reports that provide an overview of the company's organization and corporate activities, annual budgets, noteworthy accomplishments in assembly operations or management, and long-term objectives. Understanding the field of public relations. Public relations, sometimes known as PR, refers to the act of controlling and disseminating information to the public on behalf of a person or organization, such as a company, government agency, or non-profit, in an effort to affect how that entity is perceived by the general public. The difference between public relations PR and publicity lies in the fact that PR is handled on an internal level, whereas publicity is not handled on an internal level and is generated by third parties. A firm or a person might engage in public relations to increase their audience exposure by employing topics of general interest to the public and news pieces that do not call for any form of upfront payment. The exposure is primarily through various forms of media. Because of this, it can be considered a form of marketing communication rather than advertising. Instead of paying for marketing or advertising, which are both examples of what is commonly referred to as paid media, public relations work to build or achieve earned media coverage for clients. However, beginning around the turn of the 21st century, advertising has become an integral part of more comprehensive public relations initiatives. In principle, the practice of public relations comprises participating in conversations about a particular subject in a way that is both deliberate and strategic. Intrinsically, since there is not yet an established measurement system that can determine whether public relations activities are successful, it is a difficult field to master because of its transitory and expansive nature, as well as the frequent misrepresentation of its scope. Everyone can imagine this happening in their head. The task of determining what exactly constitutes public relations is not an easy one in and of itself. Today, public relations is used in virtually every sector of the economy, including businesses, institutions of government, and even charitable groups. Any company that includes people in its day-to-day operations whether those people are shareholders, employees, or customers, has a responsibility to successfully manage its public relations and maintain positive relationships with those people you will come to understand. While reading this book, it becomes clear that publicity is in fact a sub-function of the bigger function, and as such, it should not be mistaken with the latter. This chapter will help you recognize that the widespread misconception that publicity is the only function of public relations is not accurate. A lot of people have the wrong assumption that publicity is the only function of public relations. Misconceptions about public relations. Public relations may or may not apply to other social sciences, scientific disciplines, and professions, but the fact remains that few people realize that it is both an academic and a professional field. Additionally, only a small number of people are aware of exactly what is involved, what the goals are to achieve, and how exactly they can be met. Even if this might or might not be applicable to other fields of science, scientific disciplines, and professional occupations, the reality of the situation is that only a good percentage of people have come across or are familiar with these concepts. The widespread misconception that public relations is nothing more than a semi-scientific technique used by mind managers whenever there is a need to play some illegalities with the intention of hiding some undesirable truths about individuals, groups, or private and public enterprises and organizations persists to this day. Many people continue to hold this mistaken belief. This is in spite of the fact that it is anticipated that great progress will have been made in the amount of awareness that exists in the world today. People frequently make the mistake of conflating public relations with propaganda, which is not the case. Other people simply have the notion that public relations is merely made up of a series of strategies that are beneficial mainly for beautifying unpleasant or even antisocial facts. They believe that this is all that public relations is. These are two frequent misunderstandings that people have. A significant number of individuals have committed the error of incorrectly associating public relations with propaganda. On the other hand, the reality of the situation is that not even one of these widespread misunderstandings regarding public relations is correct. None of them does an adequate job of elucidating the true essence of public relations, its goals, tactics, and strategies that make up the field of public relations, either as an academic discipline or even in a professional context. Hiring a PR professional. An internal PR expert as opposed to the services of a PR consultant. It is necessary to have a strategic plan in place for public relations work to be successful in meeting the needs of both public and private companies or organizations. This approach requires including specific strategies, techniques, and actions that will help in the accomplishment of goals that have been well defined and expressed in detail. These criteria are founded on the assumption that the experts who will be contacted to properly carry them out have both the appropriate knowledge and the requisite quantity of free time. This is because both needs are necessary for the requirements to be effective. Public relations practitioners, academics, and executives of corporations and other types of organizations often engage in a heated discussion regarding the benefits and drawbacks of paying a public relations firm to take on and provide ad hoc services as opposed to paying a public relations professional to work full-time for an organization. The debate usually centers on the decision of whether or not to pay a public relations firm to take on and provide ad hoc services. It is common practice for large businesses in both the public and private sectors to adhere to the standard operating procedure of employing one or more public relations specialists on a full-time basis. They do, however, engage the additional services of knowledgeable public relations specialists when unique incidents or circumstances call for it. The majority of small and medium-sized commercial organizations, as well as government agencies, buy ad hoc services from well-known public relations firms. This is because these firms offer more flexibility. This is because they believe that the considerable experience of these organizations will help them to address obstacles and concerns in a manner that is more effective and efficient. The reason for this belief is given in the previous sentence. When compared to the option of continuously employing one or more public relations specialists, it is obvious that adopting this alternative will result in considerably lower costs. Regarding the dilemma that was outlined before, there are a few distinct points of view, and they appear to disagree on what constitutes the most effective way to handle the situation. Some academics and professionals in the industry are of the opinion that a person working for a medium-sized public or private corporation or organization, depending on the context, will be better able to meet their requirements if they are employed as an employee rather than by a large public relations firm. This opinion is shared by some of the professionals working in the field. It seems perfectly logical that PR professionals who work full-time would commit all of their available time, energy, and knowledge to the company for which they work. This is especially true when compared to what a private and respectable PR agency would consider a comparatively tiny client account. In a similar vein, the range of responsibilities that an in-house public relations expert can assume and grow typically pays off the expenses that are associated with his or her full-time position. The old cliche that public relations professionals are the last to be hired when times are good and the first to go when things slow down is unfortunately still true in many modern businesses and government agencies. The press release or news release. Writing and editing newspaper, news, stories, feature articles, and editorial comments was the primary tool of the field's initial public relations specialists, including Lee, Bernays, Creel, and Bear, as well as less well-known individuals working in this emerging sector at the time. This was the key tool of the field's initial public relations specialists. Creel, Lee, and Bernays are only a few examples of the early professionals that worked in this subject. As a result of the various statements that PR pioneers made to newspapers and magazines about the private businesses or public entities that utilize their services, the concept of the press release was created as a direct result of their efforts. This resulted in the origin of the term press release. To advertise an important event or action of the private or public enterprise or organization for which they work or advise, modern public relations specialists use the phrase news release in addition to the conventional title press release. These fundamental communication texts, which the PR team prepares and distributes to the various media as a press release or a news release, should be written in the best way possible in terms of content, structure, and style to be good, that is, to achieve the ideal goal of being distributed. This is because the PR team prepares and distributes these texts as a press release or a news release. The public relations team will either create these texts to be disseminated as a press release or as a news release, depending on the nature of the announcement. Crisis management. Crisis management is a company's plan for its response to an unforeseen situation that poses a risk to the company or its stakeholders. Large-scale industrial and environmental disasters in the 1980s sparked the field of crisis management. It is the pinnacle of PR procedures, widely regarded as the most crucial step. This crisis may take the form of flooding, or a fire in the case of physical facilities, faulty products, or anything else that places the consumer's health and safety in jeopardy, or complaints about inadequate services provided by a firm or organization. In conclusion, it is impossible to ignore the spectacular contrast between physical crises that cause harm to people, property, goods, and services, and symbolic issues that threaten the reputation of a corporation or organization. Physical crises end up causing harm to people, property, goods, and services. Symbolic issues threaten the reputation of a corporation or organization. Physical disasters put people, their property, and their goods, as well as their services, at risk. Reputational harm can be caused to a company or group of problems with their symbols. Every one of these problems is an emergency that must be resolved as quickly as possible and brought under control. They have arrived at the accurate conclusion that the Hippocratic proverb, "an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure," defines the alpha to omega or A to Z methodologically necessary in efficient crisis management. This aphorism is widely accepted as true by professionals in the public relations industry, including PR scholars, seasoned consultancies, and PR specialists. However, this is based on the assumption that all of the necessary steps have been taken and that neither governmental nor private companies or organizations have made any mistakes in the creation of their goods or in the supply of their services. It is conceivable for crisis to occur, and the way a corporation or organization handles the resolution of these types of events can have a significant impact on the reputation of the entity in question. There are just as many examples of disastrous crisis management by top international businesses and organizations as there are remarkable examples of successful management based on thinking and acting in accordance with the Hippocratic adage, prevention, or the Boy Scout motto, "Be prepared." This may come as a surprise to you, but it is a fact. There are just as many examples of successful management based on thinking and acting in accordance with the Hippocratic old expression prevention as there are of successful management. When presenting their services to a firm or organization, PR consultants and specialists who have years of expertise often have a crisis management plan that is well detailed, step by step, and well articulated. This plan specifies the people and teams that will be involved in the case of a crisis, as well as the roles that each of these individuals and teams will play in the event itself. Typically, these crisis management plans include the composition of the crisis management team that already exists within the company or organization, as well as the actions that are to be taken in the event of a crisis, as well as how to handle the required flow of information to the media and journalists, and, depending on the nature of the crisis, who to contact at the police department, the fire department, and the local hospitals. Additionally, these plans typically include the actions that are to be taken in the event that when a senior manager is put in charge of a particular crisis management team, it is standard practice for the PR experts to serve as the manager's most senior assistant. This is because the PR specialist understands the nature of the crisis management team better than anyone else. The crisis management team is provided with updates according to the schedule that has been established for periods and intervals. Unannounced alarms are activated as tests to check the team's preparedness, and the team's response to the test crisis is analyzed after the fact to determine how well the team did in response to the test crisis. The strengths and weaknesses of the handling of activities are identified and evaluated, and the experience obtained via such tests can be incorporated into the initial design if they are not already included. necessary to have an understanding that the process of sharing information among the personnel of an organization is referred to as internal communication, and that this process occurs at every level of business. The ability of an organization to communicate effectively within itself is crucial to the performance of the organization and is increasingly seen as a source of competitive advantage by an increasing number of people. This is because efficient internal communication is essential to the success of an organization. When we talk about external communication, however, we are referring to channels of connection that are more formal and take place between an organization and parties who aren't members of its own ranks. These connections take place between an organization and the public. There are numerous models that may be used to describe the process of communication. However, the simplest model that can be used to describe the process is a one-way transmission of a message from a sender to a receiver. There are many more models that can be used to describe the process. They are of the opinion that the transmission of information from its point of origin to the people who are meant to receive it is the single most crucial function that a communication strategy may carry out. The application of these methodologies has led to the development of a significant number of hypotheses that characterize a variety of aspects of communication. It is very vital that you are aware of the chance that the strategy will fail if the underlying organizational structure is not updated to suit it. This is because it is extremely crucial that you are aware of this possibility. In the process of launching a brand new business, it is essential to take into consideration a wide range of criteria. In addition to the mission and strategy statements of the corporation, these considerations include the scale of the organization, the capabilities of the technologies that are now available, and the context in which the business will function. Companies that operate on a global scale are faced with greater complexities because of their widespread presence in multiple countries and regions, each of which has their own set of laws, customs, languages, time zones, attitudes, and business practices. These complexities can be attributed to the fact that each country and region has its own unique set of laws, customs, languages, and time zones. The fact that every nation and region have their own distinct collection of laws, customs, attitudes, and economic practices is one of the primary contributors to the complexity of the situation. It is anticipated that large enterprises and businesses will start up in this new period, and there is no way that they can be managed efficiently without implementing significant modifications to the internal and external interactions that we have become accustomed to in the past. They cannot be handled effectively in any manner short of making substantial adjustments to the ways in which we deal with both our internal and external stakeholders, which is something that we have been used to doing in the past. There is absolutely no possibility that this new era will be available to facilitate the expansion of huge firms and corporations. Have a good knowledge of internal and external communication. Having a complete understanding of communication on both the inside and outside of the organization is crucial. Any organization's communication component should have as its primary objective ensuring that the organization is able to carry out its daily operations in an effective manner. As a consequence of this, the official communication of the organization is carried out in three different directions: horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. Within hierarchical organizations, vertical communication can proceed in either a downward, top-down, or upward, bottom-top way, depending on the direction it is moving in. The subordination process, which may alternatively be represented as superiority and subordination, serves as the primary foundation for this system in its broad form. Communication that is directed in an ascending direction is going to be more successful in the majority of situations than communication that is directed in an ascending horizontal or diagonal direction. This is because it always starts at the very top of the hierarchy and moves down through all levels of management until it reaches the bottom, at which point it terminates with entry-level roles. The reason for this is that it is important to have a clear chain of command. The purpose of any communication that travels downhill through an organization is to exert management and leadership over the personnel who are working at lower levels of the organizational hierarchy. This is the fundamental goal of any communication that travels downward through an organization. Incoming information from external communication is converted by the organizational structure into information that will be used for internal communication. From that point on, the information is moved in one of four different directions, depending on the objectives that were hoped to achieve by the communication, either upwards, downwards, horizontally, or diagonally. When information is distributed, the same process always takes place. When discussing the dissemination of information, it is essential to keep in mind that businesses are constantly engaged in the process of communicating with a wide range of stakeholders. These stakeholders include customers, suppliers, marketers, competitors, investors, media organizations, and officials from a variety of national authorities and regulatory bodies. As a direct consequence of this, there is a continuous sharing of knowledge taking place. There are several important differences between internal and external communication. The following is a list of key differences that may be drawn between internal communication and communication with outside parties. 1. The basic objective of an organization's internal communication is to simply disseminate information throughout its different departments and components. This is the primary goal of internal communication. On the other hand, the fundamental objective of external communication is to cultivate and maintain favorable connections with third parties that are not affiliated with the organization. Horizontal communication is the interchange of information, ideas, and experiences. Usually, the conversation focuses on managerial, behavioral, and disciplinary concerns. It is poorly geared towards technical topics except for the interaction between the project manager and the line managers. The project manager is the project spokesperson, the person who, better than anyone else, should summarize the present state, identify problems and dangers, and predict the project's eventual conclusion. 3. In this sort of communication, the project manager must defend and safeguard the project in front of partially or indirectly involved stakeholders. The most important interaction in this situation is between the project manager and the line manager. The project manager must acquire maximum collaboration from a technician who may not use project management reasoning. This interaction should be guided by diplomacy and admiration for his or her professional skills. 4. Organizations that have a variety of organizational hierarchies can benefit from increasing their level of communication in the vertical direction. This mode of communication allows information to flow in both directions, which is beneficial for determining both communication pathways and corporate positions. Communication that takes place along formal reporting lines or the chain of command is an example of vertical communication. Other types of formal communication also fall under this category. Communication occurs not only horizontally but also vertically between managers and their subordinates as well as their superiors. Vertical communication refers to the process of sharing information between higher and lower levels of a hierarchical structure, often known as a chain of command. 4. When it comes to internal communication, information is disseminated very regularly to keep up with the activities that need to be done to keep the organization active. This is done to keep up with the chores that need to be done to keep the organization active. On the other hand, when it comes to communication with the outside world, there is not a great deal that needs to be disseminated on occasion. As a result, it takes place on a less regular basis. 5. When talking with people within an organization, there is often not a great deal of physical distance between the person sending the message and the person receiving it. On the other hand, when interacting with people outside of an organization, this is not the case, since in the vast majority of instances, there is a large amount of physical distance that separates the sender and the recipient. The two different coverages can be differentiated from one another. When speaking of an organization's internal communication, it is important to note that the scope of the information that is shared is limited to the confines of the organization itself. When it comes to dealing with a particular number of external entities, coverage is often comprehensive, particularly when it comes to communication with the outside world. Channels of internal communication. When we talk about internal communications channels, what we are really referring to is the various ways in which a company can link its employees together to make the process of sharing information easier and more effective. And this is what we mean when we talk about internal communications channels. These channels are always meant to make it easier for employees to exchange the many kinds of information that they are expected to hold at all times with one another and vice versa. This includes making it easier for employees to share information with one another. It is impossible to overstate how vital it is to have a plan in place for internal communications and to have that plan in place as soon as feasible. This is due to the fact that the business manager is required to always use one channel of internal communication or another in order to keep staff informed and to ensure that they are always at the top of their game, regardless of the size of the company, whether it is a multinational corporation or a startup. This is the case regardless of whether the company is a multinational corporation or a startup. It is a communication strategy that identifies the channels that are available to the company as well as the methods in which they may be utilized most effectively. Additionally, it outlines the manner in which these channels could be utilized. The business manager is able to easily plan ahead when they take a stance on the type of information that they wish to send, because this enables the manager to easily plan ahead with the intention of ensuring that all communications are succinct and consistent with the company's values. This is done with the intention of maximizing the general benefit that these communications provide and ensuring that employees are always encouraged to give their best efforts. Types of internal communication channels. The different ways of communicating that are employed within an organization and the channels that they use. It is of the utmost importance that before moving on to listing the numerous channels of internal communication, let us first note that there are actually two separate kinds of channels that are utilized for internal communication, and these are as follows. Transmittal internal communication channels. These kinds of communication channels are set up for the most part with the intention of disseminating information to the members of the staff in the manner that their titles imply they will do. Although these channels are also used in the collection of employee feedback in one or two specific circumstances, their primary function consists of nothing more than the transmission of information to workers whenever that activity is required. In other words, their primary function is to ensure that information is communicated to workers. Receptive internal communication channels. When it comes to the process of disseminating information to the organization's employees, both transmittal and receiving internal communication channels are utilized. Receiving internal communication channels are employed in the same manner as transmittal internal communication channels. The primary distinction, on the other hand, is in the fact that it is distributed with the intention of eliciting a reaction from the employee in the form of a feedback. The following are some examples of diverse modes of communication that take place within an organization. Internal emails. Communication via email inside an organization is extremely widespread. Emails sent within a company are without a doubt the form of internal communication channel that is utilized by the vast majority of businesses in the world in this day and age. Emails are used by the vast majority of businesses for communication. Two of its most notable qualities are that it may be put to use in a wide variety of contexts and that it can be operated with relative ease in any given circumstance. It is possible to utilize internal email for a variety of purposes, including the distribution of meeting invites, the announcement of a product, the reception of updates from the CEO or HR, and other activities that are analogous to these tasks. It is true that email plays a crucial part in the internal communications of the majority of companies. However, what happens when some employees do not have rapid access to their email inboxes? This is often the situation, and it is especially true for workers employed by a company who carry out their responsibilities away from the actual site of their place of business. Some of these employees are always moving in a variety of directions. Sending SMS text messages to them can be pretty helpful as long as they have their smartphones with them. It won't be the least bit difficult to pass on information to them. When it comes to the dissemination of information, sending information by text message or SMS is nearly always faster than sending it via mail. SMS. It is the most common abbreviation used to refer to texting, which is an abbreviation that stands for Short Message Service. It is a method that allows phones to connect with one another solely through the sending and receiving of text messages that can be up to 160 characters in length. Intranet. An additional alternative to emails that are delivered over the internet, the intranet acts as a communication channel that is reserved exclusively for employees' use. An internal intranet is quite comparable to a typical company website, with the key difference being that only staff members or employees of the organization are permitted to access the internal intranet. An intranet is utilized for a variety of purposes, the most common of which are to provide users with up-to-date information regarding an ongoing project, to securely store vital materials that the organization deems to be of value, to showcase a variety of different types of content, and to facilitate the sharing of files when it is necessary to do so. Other applications for an intranet include the following: instant messaging functionality, a corporate directory, the ability to broadcast company-wide notifications, instant messaging functionality, a system for managing content, increasing the capability of automating forms, a platform for social networking available to employees, and the organization of events. Social media. Social media platforms consistently present businesses with free platforms that are easy to use and from which they can easily share content and updates and hold brief chats. This is made possible due to the fact that these platforms are always evolving and improving. It is possible that the structure of social media platforms gives the appearance that they were built after an external communication channel. This is something that does occur. On the other hand, many platforms give users the ability to run closed groups that are accessible only to those who have been invited to join, and in certain instances, closed sites that are only accessible to the company's employees. The importance that is placed on feedback on social media platforms has the potential to serve as an essential source of information from workers and to assist in the process of streamlining interactions between employees and management. Video conferencing. This is an absolute necessity for companies that employ many people who do their jobs remotely, such as those that allow their staff to work from home. Instant messaging will never be able to fully replace the requirement of having actual in-depth conversations, some of which may even call for face-to-face connection. This is because real-life conversations are more likely to provide more nuanced information. Even though instant messaging is famed for its speed, it is still easy to lose out on a great deal of important information if you do not have real conversations with the person you are interacting with. This is especially true if you are communicating with multiple people at the same time. Employees always benefit from having access to video conferencing software, which has led to the development of a great deal of software in recent years. As a result of this, anytime there is a need to hold meetings away from the office, it is incredibly helpful for employees to have access to software that allows them to engage in video conferences. This is because it allows employees to communicate with one another in perfect sync. It is standard procedure to arrange these meetings on a consistent basis for the straightforward reason that doing so enables employees to exchange their respective bodies of knowledge with one another in the same manner as if they were working together in the office. Digital notice boards. Companies or organizations that have a significant number of frontline or perhaps deskless employees on their payroll should consider installing digital notice boards for those employees as a further vital channel that enables the company to deliver or send out information that is current about the company at any given time. This can be accomplished by installing digital notice boards for these employees. The foundation of digital notice boards consists of screens that can connect to the internet. These notice boards are permanently fixed in locations that are highly visible to the public. For all the workers to be able to get their hands on the most recent information in a timely manner, this website must be one that is straightforward to navigate. A digital notice board is an example of an internal communication channel that is always capable of being updated periodically in response to new circumstances as they emerge. Because of this, companies can reliably employ it because it is capable of experiencing continuous improvement. Instant messaging software. As the concept of working remotely continues to gain popularity, communication in office settings has continued to become more and more automated and digitized than it was in the past. This is in part due to the rise of the idea of working remotely. A substantial amount of effort has been invested in the development of software to achieve the goal of making this procedure completely frictionless. However, the glacial pace of email exchanges sometimes continues to make it less than ideal and attractive to organizations that wish to participate in conversational interactions with their customers. Email has been a dominant force in the world of corporate communication for several decades. In many companies throughout the world in the modern era, the use of instant messaging software and solutions such as Slack, for example, is helping to streamline conversational communication in the workplace. This communication may take place between an employer and an employee, or it may take place between employees who have a reason to hold real-time discussions with one another. It may also take place between employees who have the purpose of handling real-time conversations with one another. Not only do employees have the ability to swiftly share information and resources whenever they want, but they also have access to the recordings of these conversations, which can be searched and referred to in the future, just like email threads. This provides employees with a number of benefits. This is only one of the many benefits that come with utilizing this approach. Another advantage is that staff have the option to share information and resources with one another in a timely manner whenever they choose to do so. Internal podcasts. Internal podcasts are built in such a way that they give internal communicators a worthwhile avenue to present information and data in a manner that is significantly more detailed when compared to what is obtainable with written text. This is because internal podcasts are constructed in such a way that they give internal communicators a worthwhile avenue to present information and data in such a manner that they are worthy of podcasts that are only available to employees and can be accessed on the intranet of a corporation. Because it is likely that employees of a company are already accustomed to listening to a variety of podcasts on a regular basis while they are working, many businesses in this area are of the mindset that there is nothing wrong with allowing employees to listen to the most recent news and gist about the company in a format that is easy to digest in whatever the circumstance may be. One of the most significant advantages of using podcasts as a method of communicating with staff members at a company is the fact that employees typically do not need to stop whatever they are working on in order to sit in front of a screen and listen to a podcast. This is one of the most significant benefits of using podcasts. The company would appreciate it if its employees were aware of this particular piece of information. They are prepared to depart at any moment, and the only thing that is preventing them is the headphones that are still in their ears. Channels of external communication. These refer to the numerous means of communication that are used by external communicators for the goal of external communication. The following is a list of some of the most widely used applications available through various channels. Telephone. Without a shred of doubt, the telephone is the mode of communication that is utilized most of the time when individuals contact individuals who are outside the organization. When there is a need for a corporation to get in touch with multiple parties that are pertinent to the issue, using telephones is an easy and convenient option that they have available to them. This is due to the fact that telephones may be transported to any location, making it possible to have a telephone on one's person at all times. Telex and fax. Even though they have been around for quite some time, telex and fax are still two of the most common ways that people communicate with the rest of the world. Even though they have been around for quite some time, telex and fax continue to be the most effective means of communication when working with firms that have their headquarters located in different countries. The utilization of these channels is interesting, and it only takes a short period of time. However, the downside is that they are not always within the price range of small businesses. Postal and telegraphic services. In the world of business, this is yet another tried and true means of communication that has stood the test of time. The most important benefit is that in comparison to telex and fax machines, they are not as expensive to operate, which is a considerable advantage. For instance, the government recognizes only one organization as having the ability to post and transmit telegraphic signals, and that is the United States Postal Service, USPS. Local messengers. The different forms of communication that are helpful at the grassroots level are referred to collectively as local messengers, which is a term that does exactly what its name says. They are put to use in communication between the grassroots level and the rest of the globe. As an example of a local messenger channel, numerous companies now pay local town criers to help them occasionally spread information. This is just one example of how local messenger channels are used. One form of local messenger channel is referred to as this: face-to-face conversation. It is likely that having direct dialogue with the individual to whom the message is directed will be required in order to fulfill the requirements set forth by the company based on the sort of information that it wants to broadcast to the outside world. Because of the potentially sensitive nature of the information that is contained inside some messages, some businesses would like to personally hand deliver that information to the individuals who will be receiving it in person. Mass communication. Most companies operating in today's society make use of a broad range of communication channels with the outside world. Mass communication is among the most common of these channels. In the modern world, many organizations are exceptionally quick to use the opportunities given by the mass media to distribute their external messages. When we refer to mass media, we are referring to many kinds of communication, such as newspapers, television, radio, and other types. Internet. The internet is without a speck of doubt the quickest method of communication with the rest of the world in the business context of today. To move forward with the process, a working internet connection on either a computer or a phone is all that is required. There is no other prerequisite equipment that must be present. The internet helps to make it simpler to link people all over the world, and it also helps to ensure that information can be quickly and easily transmitted in real time. Both benefits come as a direct result of the internet's widespread availability. Others. Other methods of communication, such as satellite, email, and courier services, as well as information services, all play significant roles in the modern day business sector. In conclusion, it can be stated that all of the communication channels that have been addressed in this book are essential to the successful running of any business, regardless of whether they are internal or external. Concepts central to strategic business communication. It is also important to keep in mind that strategic communication plays a significant role in tying together the guiding principles and the goals of business. This, in turn, increases individual motivation and broadens interest among stakeholders both inside and outside the firm. When a company starts paying attention to these specifics, it is almost guaranteed that their credibility will increase. This, on its own, can significantly contribute to the improvement of the company's reputation. The following essential ideas are covered by these communication techniques, which are among the most important. 1. Message strategy. 2. Audience analysis. 3. Goal setting. Message strategy. It is probable that a messaging plan is the single most critical item a communication manager needs to have in order to properly promote the organization that they are responsible for. It is tied to the fundamental communication tactics that the firm uses, and it entails all of the nuances of how the organization is positioned. It is not something that ought to be treated lightly because it has an effect on every piece of writing or media that is in any way has ties to a firm, even if only indirectly. The messaging strategy of a company is what makes it possible for the company to build and grow brand awareness while also ensuring that customers are made aware of all the information they are expected to know about the company. Because a single action on their part could be the deciding factor in whether a single consumer chooses to do business with their company, communication managers and companies are being cautioned to handle this situation with extreme caution. This is because a single action on their part could be the factor that determines whether a single consumer chooses to do business with their company. The following are important components of an effective message strategy. 1. Unique selling propositions, differentiating aspects. 2. A specific objective. 3. An awareness of one's intended demographic. 4. An enthralling narrative. Audience analysis. An easy way to explain audience analysis is to think of it as the process of attempting to collect information on the demographics of the people who make up the audience that a company is seeking to reach with their message. This is a good way to think of audience analysis because it provides a straightforward explanation. This study is carried out so that a company can have a better understanding of the needs, values, attitudes, expectations, beliefs, and even likely opinions of the customers who have expressed interest in purchasing their products or services. When carrying out audience analysis, it is standard practice to consider what market researchers refer to as psychographic information. This is done for a number of reasons. Audience analysis is conducted rather frequently for a variety of reasons, and this is one of those reasons. This information is always more personal, and as a result, it is much more challenging to anticipate than it would be if we were only working with basic demographics on its own. When we talk about information that is psychographic, we are referring to the views, values, and attitudes that the audience thinks are unique to them. Specifically, we are talking about the audience's personal beliefs, values, and attitudes. A clear indication that you respect the people in your audience is that you make genuine efforts to avoid insulting, excluding, or trivializing the views and values that they hold. One of the most important advantages of doing so is that it enables a firm to have the utmost respect for the people who watch its content. This is one of the most essential components of the whole thing.